Like I said, my name is Nazla Rex. I'm the Adult Services Specialist here at Pennington Library, and it's an honor to introduce Patricia Smith. She's a true powerhouse in the poetry world. Patricia's work spans from stage to the Ivy League. She's a four-time National Poetry Slam champion, and most recently, the 2025 National Book Award winner for poetry for her book, Intentions of Thunder. So many congrats to you for that. Currently, she's a professor at Princeton University and chancellor of Academy of American Poets. That's a bit of a mouthful. And she's one of the most decorated and versatile voices in literature today. We're so lucky to be able to host such an experienced and recognized voice in the world of poetry here in Pennington. So with that, I just want to take a quick look at the chat. And we have hello from Highland Park. Hello. Grateful to participate. Um, and hello from Massachusetts. And they're from Highland Park, New Jersey.
Yeah, well,
Great,
that's
great.
good too.
Yes. So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Patricia.
Ding, ding, ding. Hi, everybody. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show off my cool earrings. I found earrings that look like composition books. Is that the coolest thing you have ever in your life seen? No? Okay, well, I guess I need
I
to get around.
noticed them before. They're great.
I guess I need to get around more. Yeah. Um, oh, I see what's happening here. Hello from Linden Lane. I love you, Sarah. So this was my idea. I thought instead of teaching a workshop where I talk, you write, people have a lot of questions. First of all, about where poems come from, how, especially nowadays, I get angry or sad about something and I run to my keyboard or I run to my legal pad and I'm trying to figure out how to write a poem about whatever this thing is. But what I have to keep in mind is when I run to my keyboard or my legal pad, there are probably about 800 other people. Yes, there are about 800 other people who are also running to their legal pad. And I need to do something to make my poem different from their poem. I need to do something to make my poem stand out. There are small things that poets do. There are technical things. There are lyrical things. I want to talk a little bit about how once you have an idea, how you go about making your idea and therefore your poem different. I got started in poetry. I won't name the I won't name the year, but I got started in poetry in the poetry slam, which was a poetry competition, and so I have a very good idea of audience, and was kind of in the trenches when it came to learning what audiences respond to, and what makes an impactful poem. So what I have done is I've put together a group of poems, some of my own, some of other people, poets that I know and love, and I'm going to talk about the genesis of each poem, and I'm going to point out things in the poem and in the approach, um, which makes it effective. I also teach poetry, and so I talk a lot about signature, that each poet has develops a signature style so that no matter, everyone at the end of the semester, I tell my students, everybody put a poem on the table, no names on the poems, and we should be able to identify who wrote the poem. And that's because of the choices that each poet makes. So I'll point out some of those choices. And hopefully, how many of you guys write poetry yourself? Can you put that in the chat if you are actually poets or just readers or listeners? And that might help me a little bit. You guys are so quiet. There we go. I write. Yes, yes, yes. I write too. Good, Rosella. I like Rosella's name. Anyone else? Right?
So
No?
Patricia, my dad is with us tonight. My dad is one of the patrons here, Donald
Uh-huh.
Green, and he writes poetry. So
Fantastic.
yeah, just
Fantastic.
wanted
That's
to
good to
pipe
hear.
in. Yeah,
Okay,
for
thanks.
many years.
Seldom, but it was fun. Yep, it's a lot of fun, Millie. All right, aspire to write poetry. Okay, this is all good. This is all very good. So, okay. So, did everyone get your handout? Let's put it this way. If you didn't get a handout, can you message? Everyone's happy about writing poetry right now. Okay, good. I write, I write, I write. All right, I'm gonna go from the handout, and if there's a problem, just let us know. Okay, so there are a couple of poems of mine. I don't usually in workshops talk about or teach my own poems, but these are the ones that are closest to me. And I know exactly where it came from. I know exactly what my process was. Didn't get a handout. Okay, I'm going to see. I think probably it would be better to uh oh. Okay, so if I have a document, is it better to cut and paste or what should I do? Because I want everyone to be able to see this so I don't have to read them all. Hmm, well, I can cut and paste. I can do that. Do, 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 do. I will go to the select all. You guys excuse me for technical difficulties. And then I will copy. It's going to be a long paste in the chat, but that's what I'll do. Okay, here we go. And B. Okay, that's a lot. The screen sharing's not working, Millie. That's the problem. Okay, so the only thing that's going to be an issue with some of these poems are the line breaks, but they will all be here and maybe italics, things like that. But I'll let you know when those things are there. Okay, so everybody have it? I hope so. It's just in the chat. Um, the first poem I'll let you know. First of all, I'm an only child, uh, and I'm a daddy's girl. My mother was kind of the functional parent. She was the braid your hair, take you to church, check your grades person. And my father was my entire life. And my father was murdered in a robbery when I was 21 years old. Uh, and so I wanted to write a poem about my dad. I wanted to write a poem that told everyone how wonderful my father was. I wanted you to know him, to see him, to hear him, to feel the hollow in the world after he was gone. And it was a big task. And instead, I found myself writing poems about little things that my dad used to do, sayings of his, and the fact that he was a frustrated blues singer, and he used to take me to blues clubs where there was an open mic, and he would get up on the mic, and he was awful, 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 awful. He was such a bad singer, but that was a little thing he used to do that was a great memory of mine. Uh, but I couldn't make myself say in the poem that my father was actually gone. And the more I think about that, it was as if poetry was very important to me. And I say, if I say he's gone in a poem, then there's no chance of magic happening. There's no chance he's coming back. And so I wrote all the way around it, and then in my mind was, I'm going to still write this big be all and end all poem about my dad. I realized later that in writing about, when you want to write a big thing, write a little thing instead. If I want to write a huge poem about that big of a loss, find one of those tiny moments. Write about the tiny moment because the tiny moment illustrates much better what it is you're trying to say. If I tell you, use all these superlatives and talk about my dad, you've seen poems where those superlatives have been used before. It doesn't really get you any closer to the person or any closer to what the loss of that person means. All right. So what I did, I took one moment. I used to cook in the kitchen with my dad. My mom would be growling at us from another room, like I say in the poem. She's watching Bonanza, or cleaning the floors or something. And my father and I would be cooking. He'd say, "Do this, do that," no measuring. And while we were cooking, we'd be talking. I'd be telling him about my day, and he'd be telling me about his day at the candy factory. And that's not the last time I'm going to mention the candy factory. My mother and father worked at Leaf Candy Company, which you may not recognize until I tell you that they made the Whoppers, the malted milk balls that looked like they were in milk cartons. That was my mom and dad making those things. Okay, so I just took those moments and then I said, but this still doesn't say that my father is gone. And this is one of the few poems that, since we have them, I'm going to read to you so you can see exactly what I did. Okay. The recipe for hot water cornbread is simple. Cornmeal, hot water. Mix till sluggish, then dollop in a sizzling skillet. When you smell the burning begin, flip it. When you smell the burning begin again, dump it onto a plate. You've got to wait for the burning and get it just right. Before the bread cools down, smear it with sweet salted butter and smash it with your fingers. Crumble it up in a bowl of collard greens or buttermilk. Forget that I'm telling you it's the first thing I ever cooked, that my daddy was laughing and breathing and no bullet in his head when he taught me. Mix it till it looks like quicksand, he'd say, till it moves like a slow song sounds. We'd sit there in the kitchen, licking our fingers and laughing at my mother, who was probably scrubbing something with bleach or watching Bonanza or thinking how stupid it was to be burning that nasty old bread in that cast iron skillet. She always used whole milk and eggs and baked her cornbread until it was plump and sugary. And she branded me hopeless as a homemaker. There might be some things I say that aren't in the poem, but that's just me. She branded me hopeless as a homemaker, too damn interested in sitting in the kitchen in the half dark, learning nothing at all from a man who had other women and stayed out late on Saturday nights. When I told her that I'd made my first ever pan of hot water cornbread and that my daddy had branded it glorious, she sniffed and kept mopping the floor over and over in the same space. So here's how you do it. You take out a bowl, like the one we had with blue flowers and only one crack. You put the cornmeal in it. Oh, God, I'm sorry. Uh, you put the cornmeal in it. Then you turn on the hot water and you let it run while you tell the secret about the boy who kissed your cheek after school, or about how you really want to be a reporter instead of a teacher or a nurse, like Mama said. And the water keeps running while Daddy says you will be a wonderful writer and you will be famous someday. And when you get famous, if I wrote you a letter and sent you some money, would you write about me? And he is laughing and breathing and no bullet in his head. So you let the water move into this mix until it moves like mud moves at the bottom of a river, which is another thing Daddy said, and even though I never even seen a river, I knew exactly what he meant. Then you turn the fire way up under the skillet and you pour in the mix that moves like mud moves at the bottom of a river, like quicksand, like a slow song sounds. That stuff pops something awful when it first hits that blazing skillet, and sometimes Daddy and I would dance to those angry pop sounds. He'd let me rest my feet on top of his while we waltzed around the kitchen, and my mother huffed and puffed on the other side of the door. When you are famous, Daddy asked me, will you write about dancing in the kitchen with your father? I say everything I write will be about you. Then you will be famous too. And we dip and swirl and spin, but then he stops and sniffs the air. The thing you have to remember about hot water cornbread is to wait for the burning so you know when to flip it, and then again so you know when it's crusty and done. Then eat it the way we did, with our fingers, our feet still tingling from dancing. But sometimes the burning takes such a long time. And in that time, sometimes, poems are born. Okay, so there's two things that I want you to notice. First of all, as I said, it's a real small little moment, right? The second thing is there is a mention of my father's death in here, but it's like an afterthought when I put in. Um, okay, I'll ask you guys. Where's the um, where's the acknowledgement of my father's death?
You guys can put it in the chat.
Yeah, you can put it in the chat. I'm just staring at the chat.
Yes.
What's the line in the poem? Right. And no bullet in his head when he taught me. So by putting that in, I acknowledge that he's gone, but that is not the main movement of the poem. The best way to elegize someone is to celebrate them and not give the death the power. I use this as an example because it's the first poem where I realized this. And it's also, when you walk away from the poem, you don't walk away thinking that man is dead. You walk away knowing some things about him and about me and about our relationship to each other. Correct? All right. So these are a number of the decisions that you have to make when you're approaching something, especially something like this where the poem means a lot to you. Okay? I'm going to go on to the next poem. I'm going to tell you, and I know there are a couple of people here who have had a workshop with me before, and if I'm repeating poems, it's basically because they are the best examples, the best way I know how to get this over. Um, so there's a poet by the name of Sharon Olds, an amazing poet. She has an entire book called The Father, and it is about a cancer diagnosis, her father's illness, all the way up until when she acknowledges that he's gone. I'm going to tell you a couple of things about these poems and then point out some places in there. If you did not get a if you did not get a handout or you don't see it yet, I'll make sure you get one. So if I don't read these poems in their entirety, you'll be able to do that on your own when you get them later. All right, I have two Sharon Olds poems here for two very different reasons. One is there are things that we see all the time that we relegate to these things are disturbing or these things are gross or I don't want to add this to something that's supposed to be as beautiful and lyrical as a poem. One of the choices that you have is to turn that thing into something beautiful. And it's not easy to do, but it goes back with that unexpected entry point that I talked about before. And the thing that Sharon Olds does here at first, she spent a lot of time in the hospital next to the bed of her husband, next to the bed of her father, and she had the same surroundings day by day. You know, the silver tray, the television that's bolted to the wall, and the glass at his bedside where when he would cough and spit up, he would spit into this glass. And that is the thing that she turned into a thing of beauty. That's a choice that she made. Because when you think about it, her entire book is about what would be a horrible thing. And you open it and you open it to this page where something that you thought, ugh, you can't make poetry out of that. She does exactly that. Okay. So I'm going to point out some pieces of the poem. It just starts out, I think of it with wonder now, the glass of mucus that stood on the table next to my father all weekend. Then she talks a little bit about what the cancer is like, the fact that her father had to spit into the cup many times. And then it sits there like a glass of beer foam, shiny and faintly golden. Now, those of you who have seen that or done that, you know how you spit into the glass and there's like these globules floating around, kind of what's that thing that we used to have in the 60s? The lava lamps. It looked kind of like a lava lamp. I don't know anything about the 60s, but I heard. Um, so that's there. So if you can imagine that, and then she talks about the reality again. He gurgles and coughs and reaches for it again and finally gets the heavy sputum out. And like he can't eat anything anymore. So she's giving you what we could normally would think. It's chalkish and it's ropey. He has to roll it in his throat to form it. And then so far you're going, well, nothing beautiful yet. But then she says, I wonder, it's a wonder to me that it did not disgust me. That glass of phlegm that stood there all day and filled slowly with the compound globes, and I'd empty it and it would fill again and shimmer there on the table until the room seemed to turn around it in an orderly way, a model of the solar system turning around the gold sun. My father, the dark earth that used to lie at the center of the universe, and the sun would be at the center of the actual universe and also of her universe. So you see what she's doing. Now turning with the rest of us around the bright glass of spit on the table, these last mouthfuls. Okay? So, can you see the beauty in that? Not only does she turn something that we've seen before into something we haven't seen or thought of, but also puts her father at the center of her life and what life he has left. She treasures these because these are the last bits of life that she will see from her father. Okay? Um, and we will, everybody with me so far? Yes? No? Kinda?
I think it's going okay. I did share the
Okay.
document in the chat. We got a thumbs up from Millie.
Okay. Good. Okay. So I'm gonna keep going. This next poem is also Sharon Olds. This is toward the end of the book when she is told that her father is dying. And I'm realizing now that I'm talking, it's so strange that I went into a reading once and I was reading, and then I saw people had their shoulders slumped and they were looping nooses around their necks and stuff. It's because I was doing what is basically a bad news reading. And I realize I write, most of the time I write is when I'm writing about something that's difficult. So while I just got through talking about my father, now I'm talking about Sharon Olds' father. And now that I think about the poems I have, but I am happy sometimes. So, don't judge me on this. This is toward the end of the book when Sharon has gotten word that her father is close to dying and she has to catch a plane and she wants to get there to see him beforehand. So, what she decided to do was write as if she was running. Okay, there's a thing that happens in poetry. You have a lot of power over how the reader reads the poem. Not the way the poem appears on the page, how you use punctuation, how you break up stanzas. If you just imagine that every time someone's reading your poetry, they're reading it aloud and you're giving them guidance on how to read it. So you'll notice that this poem does not have any stanza breaks, which means she wants you to read straight through. And she's added some elements to the poem that have your heart beating quickly, like her heart was beating when she was trying to reach that plane before the doors closed. Okay. And this will not take me as long. I'm going to read this so you can hear it. I suggest too that we are living in a wonderful time in which you can go online and search this poem and this artist, this poet, and hear her read it also. So I'm going to try and do my best. When I got to the airport, I rushed up to the desk, brought a ticket. 10 minutes later, they told me the flight was canceled. The doctors had said my father would not live through the night, and the flight was canceled. A young man with a dark brown mustache told me another airline had a nonstop leaving in 7 minutes. See that elevator over there? We'll go down to the first floor, make a right. You'll see a yellow bus get off at the second Pan Am terminal. I ran. I, who have no sense of direction, raced exactly where he told me, a fish slipping upstream deftly against the flow of the river. I jumped off that bus with those bags I had thrown everything into in 5 minutes and ran. The bags wagged me from side to side as if to prove I was under the claims of the material. I ran up to a man with a flower on his breast. I, who always go to the end of the line, I said, help me. He looked at my ticket. He said, make a left and then a right, go up the moving stairs and then run. I lumbered up the moving stairs. At the top, I saw the corridor, and then I took a deep breath. I said goodbye to my body, goodbye to comfort. I used my legs and heart as if I would gladly use them up for this, to touch him again in this life. I ran, and the bags banged against me, wheeled and coursed in skewed orbits. I have seen pictures of women running, their belongings tied in scarves, grasped in their fists. I blessed my long legs he gave me. My strong heart I abandoned to this own purpose. I ran to gate 17, and they were just lifting the thick white lozenge of the door to fit into the socket of the plane. Like the one who is not too rich, I turned sideways and slipped through the needle's eye, and then I walked down the aisle toward my father. The jet was full, and people's hair was shining. They were smiling. The interior of the plane was filled with a mist of gold endorphin light. I wept as people weep when they enter heaven, in massive relief. We lifted up gently from one tip of the continent and did not stop until we sat down lightly on the other edge. I walked into his room and watched his chest rise slowly and sink again. All night I watched him breathe. Okay. So instead of a lot of end stopped lines, a lot of periods, you will see that Sharon's use of commas throughout this. If you are reading quickly, you do not stop at those commas. You keep going. You keep going. And if you look at the places where she did use periods, okay, and the flight was canceled, as if that's the end of it. I can't go now. The flight's canceled. Boom. End. Then she goes on and she discovers something. So if you look again, look at this poem and see where the periods are, you'll see that she is instructing you on how to read this. And if you take what she is writing about and take the form that she used with very little end punctuation, you will know that she is instructing you on how to read the poem so that your heart will be beating as quickly as hers when you reach the end, and you will be as relieved as she was to be able to slip sideways through that door and down the aisle and toward her father. All right? And I think now we have something that's not about a dead father. Okay, the poem Antarctica Considers Her Explorers is written by a nature essayist. Her name is Diane Ackerman. She spent a lot of time in Antarctica. Uh, those of you who are just beginning to write poetry or don't write poetry, there is something called a persona poem. A persona poem is where you step into someone else's shoes and write from their point of view or its point of view. You can even write from the point of view of an inanimate object. When I first discovered persona poems, I was so gleeful about it. All my poems became persona poems. I'm like, what's it like to be a piece of gum under a desk in a school? Or what's it like to be a gym shoe? Or what's it like? And like anything else, you write, you have fun, and then you realize that it's a device, a poetic device that you use when it would be the best choice. So what Diane did here, she took the voice of Antarctica. This poem is in Antarctica's voice as explorers are entering her body or as explorers are entering the land. But she makes you think of Antarctica as a woman with explorers entering her body. And I realized that, of course, I picked too many poems, so I'm going to point to some things, and then later you can read them, and I will give you my email address if you have a response or something that you want to say about the poem or questions we don't get to. I want to make sure we have at least about 10 minutes or so for questions. You will see in the first line, she shows you Antarctica is the speaker of this poem. Brash as brash ice, they flock to me. And she's talking about the explorers, and she describes them. They are keen as migrating birds, they're white like the kelp goose. And then in the second stanza, she tells you what they're dressed in. First, she says, they come to me by water, by sled. Later in the stanza, they come to me dressed in the plumage of birds. And what she means is they come to her dressed in goose down because they need to stay warm. Orange and red, like birds, they nest among twigs and sing songs, flap their arms in the cold. Okay? And then the third stanza, she's saying they would sooner bear their souls than their flesh because I could kill them if they weren't dressed right. And one of the most beautiful lines, I think, they come in fur, down, and leather, they strip from lesser beast and walk through my crystal orchards, quilted in tight posses of life, needing the world's full bestiary to face my staggering chasms, my cascading glare. Okay? In that next stanza, they bring their starry eyes, their cunning, their hot blood, their beautiful fever. And now you are reminded again that you are listening to Antarctica as a woman. They pour like lava through my limbs, pour slowly from one shore to the other, and leave me shaking. She too is as fearful of them as they are of her. And if you consider what explorers can do to land, they leave me shaking when unearthly calm. Why am I so calm? They may be here to hurt me or to change me. And then this is the part I always start crying when I'm reading this to a class. This poem, more than a lot of them, illustrate to me just how amazing poetry can be. Right? They are coming now. I feel their pulse rapid as wings beating at my fingertips. I taste their salty skin as they sweat hard under layers of goose down and silk. Lusty as waterfalls, tough as granite, they have come to seize me, chaste and sparkling, with their small arms and huge hearts, these madmen who yearn like the sun, torrid, molten, who mood like chameleons, these fierce dreamers, these bright blades. Now I want you to take special note of the language toward the end of this, especially after she says they have come to seize me. And then she says, I know them. I know their small arms. I know they have huge hearts. They are madmen. They're here because they yearn. They want. They want to explore. They want to discover new things. And then she uses heated words, torrid, molten. So she's setting up um, a contrast to how chilly things are. You know, how cold she is. Torrid, molten. They move like chameleons. Fierce, bright, blades. And I love the word blades because that's a little tiny, it's still lyrical, but it's a little tiny undercurrent of violence and the violence that they might do even while it sounds like a compliment. I wanted to put this in because I wanted you to see how effective a um a persona poem could be. There's one other persona poem in this list, and it's toward the end. I have a book of poems about Hurricane Katrina, and so I put that in toward the end. Okay, this next poem was written by a student of mine. I asked, not a student at Princeton, this was an adult class, and I asked them what is the one thing that they wish they could write about that they can't write about. And this young man had had a speech impediment when he was a kid, and his mother hated him for it. She had come to America to give him an opportunity. She saw his reluctance to get over his speech impediment as a slap in her face. And I put this in because sometimes the best way to approach a poem is just to put down what actually happened. So this is a dialogue between him and his mother with some of his mother's internal thoughts in. And I'm going to look for a second and see what else I've got here. Ooh, wow. Okay. Uh, I'm going to read this one simply because it is a poem that was meant to be read aloud so you can see the sounds. And it begins with his mother's internal thoughts and then goes on into the dialogue. What am I going to do with you? I didn't think it would be this way. Not America, not my marriage, this apartment that's a hell on earth. Say softly with me, the rope is wound round the roller pin. The rope is wound the whelp up. There, he's doing it again. It's always so dark in this kitchen. I can't get the plants to grow. I had to throw Stephen's shoes out last week because of the mold. The rope is wound round the roller pin. The rope is wound the whelp. What am I going to give them? Fried onions on bread again? Stephen's sick, always losing his temper. He wasn't always like that. The rope is wounded roll. No, the rope is round. The rope is what? The rope. 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 What? Damn you! I don't understand what's wrong with you. Why don't you get it? The rope. Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! You're lazy and you're selfish, and I don't understand why you're doing this to me. Why are you, all of you, doing this to me? I can leave, disappear, go back to Poland. How did I ever get talked into coming here? It was hell there too, but what's going to become of him? He can't talk. He'll be beaten down. The rope. Stop it! Don't you cry. Don't you dare cry now. Just say the words. Say the words right. The rope. Stop it, you freak show. The rope is wounded is wound. Okay. So all that happens here is Les, I forgot to put his name down here, but Les looks back on what those sessions were like when his mother was basically trying to get him to speak correctly because he represented everything she had hoped for in coming to America, and he was a grave disappointment. Okay, so the choice he made, he could have written another poem that just said, my mother this, and this is what it was like, but instead he wanted to put you in the room and he wanted you to hear exactly what was going on. He instructed me at the end of the poem to pronounce the last word as wound. Okay. And there's also, so you can, the interior thoughts of his mother are actually something that, depending on your situation, your family situation, you might be able to identify with. You know, having hopes and everything riding on those hopes, and then having that disappointment. Okay, so I just want to let you know I am going to go until 8:15. I hope that's okay with everyone. Um, okay, so we have a small poem coming up. Jasper, Texas, 1998. I'm sure some of you are familiar with Lucille Clifton. This is another persona poem. In 1998, a man named James Bird was tied to the back of a truck in Jasper, Texas. James Bird was an African American man. He was tied to a back of a truck and dragged through the town. As he was dragged through the town, he began to lose skin and to lose pieces of his body. Some pieces of his body became detached. They drove to the front of an African American church By then, all that was really left was his torso. They left his torso in front of the church as, I suppose, a message. Lucille Clifton writes very short, very beautiful poems. She's a master at choosing an unexpected entry point. Uh, she decided that she would write a persona poem in the voice of James Bird's head, which had become detached from his body. Uh, the head is talking to other parts of the body and also talking to the reader. I am a man's head hunched in the road. I was chosen to speak by the members of my body. The arm, as it pulled away, pointed toward me. The hand opened once and was gone. Why and why and why should I call a white man brother? Who is the human in this place? The thing that is dragged or the dragger? What does my daughter say? The sun is a blister overhead. If I were alive, I could not bear it. The townsfolk sing, we shall overcome, while the hope bleeds slowly from my mouth into the dirt that covers us all. I am done with this dust. I am done. To point out a couple of the choices beyond the choice to make this a persona poem that I almost called her Auntie. I call her Auntie Lucille, and they were like, Auntie? That Lucille Clifton made. Uh, the first thing is just really physically, this is what is going on. The second one is more to the reader. The first line, why and why and why. There are so many questions in this poem that begin with why. And so I think that's why it was repeated. And who is the human in this place? Me or the man who is dragging me? And the most beautiful and heartbreaking line in the poem is, what does my daughter say? This is not James Bird, the man. This is a head, his head. And the last memory, I have a daughter. She's going to see this. She's going to know this. She's going to have to live the rest of her life knowing this. What does she say? And then it says, look, you who are reading this poem and you who did this thing, it's like, what does my daughter say? And also, I am bleeding. No, I am bleeding from this mouth, right, into the dirt that covers us all. I am dirty. The people who dragged me are dirty. And you reading this, I want you to think, are you dirty too? Okay. Oh, I think I'm going to skip metaphors for now, although if anybody has a question about it.
Patricia, Millie was
Yes,
asking
yes,
about
Millie.
in Lucille's poem, and the eyes are not capitalized, question mark.
There's right, right. She doesn't capitalize many of her poems. So
Okay.
and I think she does make a choice that sometimes for the majority of her poems, she doesn't capitalize. Okay. And my thing here is I think she may have chosen this will be a poem that where I don't capitalize because this is such a small man for so many people. And I can talk some more about that when we have questions, but that's what I think. Metaphors, 2000, oh, 2000. I'm looking to see. Okay, good, good. I'm gonna do the 2,000 pounds. Um, this is a poem by Brian Turner. Brian Turner was a sergeant in the military. His first book was called Here Bullet, and it was all about his experiences at war. Um, when we see a story about a suicide bombing, for instance, miles and miles, thousands of miles away, we right away think, what an evil person. We shake our heads along with the rest of the news. We may be becoming numb to violence. We do realize it's a bad thing. One of the aspects of looking for an unexpected entry point is to move in as close as you can to the poem. Also, human to human, you as a human looking at another human is always stronger than you looking at a concept. So if I'm reading about war as a concept, I'm not as moved as when I read about someone in the midst of a war, a human just like me, where I may be able to draw parallels. So our instinct to write about that huge thing, like, the poem that I read about my father, I could have written a huge elegy that went outside of our moment together. But I think by moving in close to that one moment, it was a more effective elegy. So Brian wanted to write about a suicide bombing, the aftermath of which he witnessed. He did not know the suicide bomber. He used his imagination and he moved in so close that the first few lines of this poem are the suicide bomber's fist and thumb poised over the button that will detonate the bomb. Okay? And then I want you to see where the suicide bomber's mind goes from there. And then we'll talk a little bit about that, and I'm almost done. It's called 2,000 Pounds. It begins simply with a fist, white-knuckled and tight, glossy with sweat, with two eyes in a rearview mirror watching for a convoy. The radio, a soundtrack that adrenaline has pushed into silence, replacing it with a heartbeat, his thumb trembling over the button. You see that little wiggly line right after the first thing? I don't know. It has a name. I don't know what it is. It's I'm about to take your mind somewhere else. So we're going into the mind of the suicide bomber. A flight of gold. That's what Safwan thinks as he lights a Miami, draws in the smoke, and waits in his taxi at the traffic circle. He thinks of summer 1974, lifting pitchforks of grain high in the air, the slow drift of it like the fall of Shatha's hair. And although it was decades ago, he still loves her, remembers her standing at the canebrake where the buffalo cooled shoulder deep in the water, pleased with the orange cups of flowers he brought her. And he regrets how so much can go wrong in a life, how easily the years slip by, light as grain, bright as the street's concussion of metal, shrapnel traveling at the speed of sound to open him up in blood and shock, a man whose last thoughts are of love and wreckage, with no one there to whisper him gone. One thing that this poem did for me is when I see these huge acts of violence, which we see more and more often nowadays, I think of the individuals involved before I think of the act itself. Not trying to humanize everybody, you know. What this poem does is it names the bomber. His name is Safwan. What he is thinking of are not any political motive, not the people who are about to be hurt by this, but he's thinking back to a woman that he loves. It becomes a beautiful poem, right? The pitchforks of grain high in the air, the slow fall like her hair. It was decades ago. Someone he loved. He still loves her. He remembers how she looked. He remembered how pleased she would be when they were together. And the line that twists this poem and the one that this poem revolves on, and I've asked Brian about this, and he regrets how so much can go wrong in a life. There's a moment, and we don't know what was involved in that. Something happened. The life he was living became something else. And if you listen to that line, we can all say that. Anybody who winds up in a predicament that they weren't in or didn't expect can say, how can so much go wrong? How can so much go wrong in a life? How easily the years slip by. I was there and now I'm here. Okay? He brings back the grain again. You see the pitchforks of grain earlier in the poem? The years slip by, light as grain, bright as the street's concussion of metal. It does not stop to say, and then he pushes the button. You know, because of how the poem changes. Bright, which is a good, which is a positive word, right? Light as grain, bright, and then line break. As the street's concussion of metal, shrapnel traveling at the speed of sound. Okay? His last thoughts, love and wreckage. The wreckage that he's causing, and also the wreckage of a life. Okay? Um, Shush. Okay, I am definitely not going to read this long poem. I've got the last two poems are poems of mine that I knew I wanted to tell you about. Uh, you can we'll just read the epigram. Um, epigraph. I can never keep those straight. Uh, on July 6, 2016, 32-year-old Philando Castile was pulled over by police in Falcon Heights, Minnesota, in a car with his girlfriend, Diamond Reynolds, and her 4-year-old daughter. After being asked for his license and registration, Castile told the officer that he had a legal firearm. He was told, "Don't pull it out," and even though he insisted that he would not, Officer Geronimo Yanez shot him 7 times. The shooting and Castile's death was live streamed on Facebook by Diamond Reynolds. I don't know how many of you remembered this or how many of you are familiar with this situation, but Diamond Reynolds, it was live. It was live, the questioning, the shooting, everything. Um, so we'll talk a little bit about entry point. There's so much violence nowadays, and we get tired of reading about it. We get numb to it. So what am I going to do with this story that mostly everyone has saw this story on the news? People are like, no more. I don't want to hear anything else about it. I'm numb now. Please stop. So how do I? It's almost like a how do I get them focused on something else, and then before they know it, they're into the story that they didn't want to read. Okay, so I think about who's there. How many viewpoints are in this story? Philando Castile's viewpoint is there. Diamond Reynolds' viewpoint is there. The policeman's viewpoint is there. The viewpoint of everyone on the street who saw this, that's there. The people who read about it in the newspaper, it's there. The people who saw it on television is there. So do I want to write a persona poem? Do I, where, you look at all the viewpoints, you try on all the viewpoints in a story, and when the viewpoint becomes really uncomfortable, that's probably where you should start thinking about writing. And there are many poets that won't tell you that, and that's not their, that's me. That's how I think about writing. If I'm disturbed, or if I say to myself, I couldn't possibly do that, that means I should do it. Okay, so I look at all those people, and I think, what's the most disturbing viewpoint? I decide the most disturbing viewpoint is the 4-year-old who is strapped in the back seat and sees it all. And then I start questioning myself. What do 4-year-olds do? Well, they like watching television. They like cartoons. What kind of cartoons do 4-year-olds like? I have no idea nowadays, but I do remember when I was growing up, we had the Saturday morning cartoons. That was must-see TV. What did I watch? I watched the Looney Tunes. I love Looney Tunes. Looney Tunes were violent. Looney Tunes were racist sometimes, but I didn't know that then. What did I like in Looney Tunes? I loved Roadrunner. I laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. What happened in Roadrunner? The coyote would fall off a mountain. There'd be a puff of dust to show that he hit ground, and the next scene he'd be right back. Okay, what else happened in some other Looney Tune cartoons? Daffy Duck. Elmer Fudd would shoot Daffy Duck directly in the beak, and the beak would spin around his head a few times and land again in the front, and then he'd be fine. Okay, so a 4-year-old, if you watched a lot of cartoons, your idea of death was it's a temporary inconvenience. You fall off a mountain, you land, you climb back up the mountain, you go on. Next scene, okay? And so this entire first part of this poem is just about the Roadrunner and Coyote, about that happening all the time, you know? And it's meant to draw readers in where they say, hey, I remember that cartoon, or I remember hearing that cartoon, or my mother told me about that cartoon, or whatever. Okay. So you are pulled in and you're saying, I'm thinking about cartoons now. Okay. And then part two, it's like, okay, so little kids talk about dead people as if they just laid down for a nap or went to the corner bodega. Eh, I'm not liking that too much. We were talking about cartoons. What's happening here? And at the end of that second part, at age 4, children begin to grasp the idea that death is final. And then in the third part, and you're going, where's she going with this? It's the story of Deanna Reynolds, the 4-year-old, Diamond Reynolds, and Philando Castile. Deanna Reynolds is buckled into her seat as a 4-year-old. She is taken out of her seat basically as a grown woman. She now knows death is death. Death is no game. You don't come back from it. And at the end of it, she's been trying to convince her, no, he's gone. And she finally says, okay, Mama, I understand. He's dead. Now you please stop cussing and screaming. I don't want you to get shooted. Okay? So the choice was, I'm going to linger in this Looney Tunes world for a while until I pull you in, and then I'm going to start with the story I really want to tell you. All right? Last one. It's just good. We got, well, we have 1 minute, but we have 15 minutes. Last one is from a book called Blood Dazzler. It is a book of poems about Hurricane Katrina. Uh, in, I'm sorry, that, I don't know how yours looks, but where it says Katrina becomes a Category 5 storm, that's just an italicized line, but beneath the title. In this book, Katrina, the choice that I made that pulled the book together, Katrina is personified the same way Antarctica was personified in the earlier poem. It gave me a chance to look at everything that happened during Katrina, not only from the viewpoint of people who saw it, who were there, or who saw it on the news, or who read about it in the paper, but also from the point of view of the storm itself. So there were spots in the book where I said, okay, so much has happened. What does Katrina think about this now? So because she was a woman, she was alternately um, remorseful, sad, vindictive, giddy, resigned to things, uh, all of that. So I had her taking on these different, she's a woman, so she sees something. For instance, there was a long poem about the 34 nursing home residents that were left behind to die. And right after that, Katrina says, well, of course you died. You were praying to God. You should have been praying to me. So she comes in and out of the whole thing. So she's a woman. And so at the beginnings of the book, she begins as she doesn't have a name yet. She begins as a tropical depression, grows into a tropical storm, becomes a hurricane, and then she gains power. So this is when she becomes a Category 5 storm, which is the highest possible rating. Okay. For days I've been offered blunt slivers of larger promises. Even flesh, my sweet recurring dream, has been tantalizingly dangled before me. I have crammed my mouth with buildings, brushed aside skimpy altars, snapped shut windows to bright shatter with my fingers, and I've warned them, soft, you must not know my name. Could there be other weather, other divas stalking the cringing country with insistent eye? Could there be other rain laced with the slick flick of electric and my own pissed boom? Or could this be it? Finally, my praise day, all my fist at once? Now officially a bitch, I'm confounded by words. All I've ever been is starving, fluid, and noise. So I huff a huge sulk, thrust out my chest, open wide my solo swallowing eye. You must not know. Scarlet glare fixed on the trembling crescent, I fly. So in the poems before this, Katrina's torn, the storm is torn. If I touch land, people will die. Here, she's at her most powerful, and that power overrides all of that. She wants to see how powerful she can be. And you see, I'm using human things at the end. I huff, I thrust out my chest, I open my eye, the eye of the hurricane. I open it, and now my glare is fixed on, and you know the New Orleans is known as the Crescent City. Scarlet glare is fixed on the trembling crescent. Here I come. Okay. Um, all right. That's me. That's what I came to do. I hope you guys enjoyed it or learned something. Um, and I am more than willing to take questions if you would like to ask questions.
That was great, Patricia. Thank you so
No
much.
problem.
People can put their questions in the chat if it's easier. I don't think there's anything in the Q&A
You guys
as
don't
of
have
yet.
any questions? Not about where I got my
Mm.
earrings or nothing? Well, at least let me know if you learned anything.
Oh, absolutely. I wasn't familiar with persona style. That really moved me. Taking that perspective in a poem was, I've read your work, and I knew that that was a format that you use quite often, but I hadn't really thought of the process
Yeah,
of studying a poem that way. It's
yeah.
very interesting, and it's therapeutic if you think about it. I appreciate that. Let's see, we have a couple things in the chat. Love this. Is there any particular topic you like to write about?
Uh, topics. I would love to write a really good nature poem, but I can't. Uh, I, I grew up around concrete and all these things, and I now live in absolutely gorgeous Pennington. I have foxes and deer tumbling across my yard all the time. I just can't reach it, and it could be that I'm not meant to write those poems. Maybe that's not me. I do. I like to write about music. I like to write about blues. I like to write about Motown. Pretty much my soundtrack when I was growing up. Um, I probably will write a lot more about my dad now that I've gotten over that uh, hump. Um, I it looks like what happens is I don't think about what I'd like to write about because every time I sit down and try to go through that, something urgent shows up or something that I feel I need to write about as opposed to, sometimes I don't really like writing about this. I don't want to write about this, but it feels really pressing. And so that kind of moves the other stuff to the back burner for a while, and now my back burner is getting kind of crowded. Yeah. Now that I've done a book of selected poems, and I've pretty much gathered all or most of the poems that I've done for the last odd number of years, I might be able to sit down and think about more lyrical work. Uh, I'm gonna either finish a novel I'm writing, or I'm gonna write a memoir, and so I think that'll lead me into some other directions where I might be able to just spend some time on. Well, this is quite pleasant, I might be able to do that. You made me work. Yay, Phyllis! Phyllis, you know what? I am going to put. Well, I'm going to put my email in this. Phyllis, you gonna send me that poem? Okay, if Phyllis agrees to send me the poem, I'll keep going. If not, I'll stop right now. No. Um, yeah, Phyllis. Okay, I got your name down now. I've screenshot your name, so it's on. What was your preparation, training, education to develop? Oh, I love you. I don't particularly think I'm phenomenal, but that's very nice of you. Preparation. Uh, I can pinpoint one thing that I think yeah, this was great. Like I said, I'm an only child. I was a daddy's girl, still a daddy's girl. Paid so much attention to my father. And one of the things my dad would do at the end of the day is after dinner, he would sit in the living room. You know how those 1960s living rooms were all overstuffed? Shadow boxes with millions of things in them and plastic on the furniture. And, so I remember this warmth and all this clutter. And he'd sit down, he would just start talking about his day. And he worked at the candy factory. So the way he would talk about it was like it was a soap opera. He would introduce me to people. Oh, we got a new worker today. Her name is so and so. Here's what I know about her. Blah, blah. This happened. There was an accident on the floor today, and we messed up bunches of candy, and we had to throw it away. And, blah, blah, blah. And so I would come to look forward to, well, what's today's installment in, Candy Factory, Days of Life of the Candy Factory or something. And what he was doing is he was teaching me that there were other ways to look at the world beside what I was learning or not learning in school. And when I say not learning, I'm serious because I am a product of the Chicago public schools where English may as well have been a elective. I mean, really, they were sloppy. And then it would be people in our neighborhood. Like, well, there goes Miss So and so. Where do you think she's going? Or here she's coming back from the store. What do you think is in her bag? Who do you think was waiting for her? And I'm like, And so he was opening up the world, which was basically none of my business, but he was opening up the world and making me ask those same questions of the world. What do you think that tree is saying? That tree sees you guys walk back and forth, just going to school and coming home every day. It hears what you're talking about. What do you think the tree remembers? So he brought with him, when he moved up from the South, he brought with him something I came to call the tradition of the back porch, where everything had the possibility, everything was a possible story, you know. And so that was what I just loved and loved. And so I knew I wanted to tell stories. I just didn't know how. I didn't know how. And so poetry was like, pow, this is going. And uh, I think of him all the time when I'm stuck on a poem or something like that. And so uh, I felt like I owed him these stories for the stories that he told me when I was small. So everything has him at the root of it. I think that's, yeah. What was who said, can you explain the Sylvia Plath poem? Okay. Um, okay, I'm gonna keep going for a little bit until I get to the end of the questions. Is that okay?
I think that's all right.
Okay.
I think
I'm
that's
going
a
to
good
go
plan.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to the Sylvia Plath poem. I skipped it uh for this reason because I knew someone would ask about it. Uh Sylvia I'm getting there. I'm just looking at my own personal little. Okay. The key to this poem is the first line. Okay, first of all, metaphors is not metaphors and similes. Metaphor is I am a rose, simile is I am like a rose. Okay, so you directly compare. So these are all metaphors, right? I am a riddle in 9 syllables. When I say nine, how many things can you think of? The number nine. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. There are 9 somethings. Ding, ding, ding. Not yet? Not yet? Okay. I'm going to explain it then. There are 9 months when you carry a baby. Okay? This speaker is pregnant. Now look at the lines. An elephant. I'm an elephant. I'm a ponderous house. A melon strolling on 2 tendrils. And what are the 2 tendrils? The legs. I'm a melon, right? Oh, red, and everything's plump in this poem. Red fruit, fine timbers, ivory, loaves. This loaf is big with its yeasty rising. I'm new minted money in a fat purse. I'm a way to bring new people into the world. A stage, a cow and calf. I've eaten a bag of green apples, big and lumpy, right? Boarded the train, there's no getting off. You can't be a little pregnant. You can't be a little pregnant, right? So there's no getting off. I've signed on now, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Okay? So it's a poem about pregnancy. Okay? Got it?
Very cool.
Got it,
Got it.
Marie? Yeah. The poems sound like music. They do, Donald. I have my. This is how I revise. Plus, when I said I'm a Motown girl, one of the things you know about me, I used to listen to 60s radio in the bed after I was supposed to be sleeping. Big big 40 stations, top 40 stations. I can and I would you can challenge me on this, Donald. If someone puts an oldie station on right now, I could sing at least 90% of the songs. Not 90% of the black songs, not 90% of the soul songs, 90% of the songs. I will challenge you to a Neil Diamond at any time. Also, when I revise 3 steps. You guys should listen to this. First is the story I started to write there, because sometimes we can poet ourselves out of our stories. Okay? We add too much adornment. We think we're being pretty. The story's gone. The second thing, language. If I've heard it before, I take it out. If it's comfort language where I'm saying this way because it's the way it's always been said, that should not be there. Okay? Third is music. It's you think of a poem as a composition, you know? So if the words are clashing, unless I want them to clash because I want to disturb you sonically somehow, if I don't want them to clash, I want them to read like a piece of music. I want the sounds to complement each other, unless I don't. So most of them, yeah, and that is so. I do try very hard for them to have a musical aspect. Okay. The Plath poem has 9 lines. Oh, yeah, right. 9 line, 9 months. Who am I? Okay, the poem select music. Plath, how you channel your emotions when they might be overwhelming. I think about who else is hearing them. Okay. When I lost my father, and I know those of you who have lost people close to you, there's a period when you feel like it's just you. You're the only one. No one ever has hurt this much. No one ever has lost anyone that needs this much. I'm the first, I'm the only. When you realize how many people don't read poetry, how many people don't read, and they may find themselves in an audience where I'm reading a poem, and I read a poem about my dad, or I have another whole situation, mother, or something they've seen in the news, and they go, okay, I felt that way. I didn't know there was a way to express it. And most important, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. So it sometimes it's hard to get into the writing of the poem. Sometimes it's hard to finish it. You have to kind of claw through emotions that you've brought back up to the surface. But think of how many people feel the same way and don't have any way to go with it. Okay? So that's the reasoning for me. And when I think about a poet being a witness, you're not just witnessing for yourself, you're witnessing for people who don't have poetry or don't have any way to access those feelings. Okay, okay, that's it. I think that's it. This has been
That's it.
so much fun. This was
Uh,
great.
it was really great.
Thank
Really,
you.
thank you so much for donating your time.
No problem. Thanks
And
everybody that showed up. Really, really appreciate it. Oh, and uh let me put where did my list go? Okay, I can put it right here. Okay, yeah, I think I see when I put that stuff in the chat, I lost my box, my chat box. So,
okay, do you want me to put your email in there?
yeah, can you?
I can.
Don't put the
The
Princeton one. Put
don't
the
put the Princeton.
no,
Okay.
put the other one, the word woman one.
Okay.
Or is it just the Princeton one just doesn't like you, but we had trouble. I want okay, who's supposed to send me a poem? Was it Millie or Marie? Millie? La 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 la. Oh no, Phyllis. Okay, Phyllis
Phyllis.
is going to
Yeah.
send me a poem. And also, if you guys think of any questions that you didn't get a chance to ask, or you look through the poems again and you've got a question, send me the question and I will answer you. Okay? Thank you, Pennington Public Library. Thank you, everybody who took time out of their evenings to join me. I really, really, truly appreciate it. And go write or read some poetry.
Sounds great. Thank you, Patricia.
Sure, sure.
Everyone have a great night.
No problem. Thanks. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you. Bye.
Bye bye.